Hey guys, I suppose almost anyone who's followed the men's rights movement for any length of time now knows that we've lost Angry Harry. And uh, recently, Dan Moore laid out a video. I'm going to link it in the load bar where he really gave some good thoughts about Harry that are really worth listening to, especially for those of you who didn't know him. I'd like to echo Dan's sentiments and perhaps offer some of my own, and maybe some insight into who Harry was that you probably won't hear anywhere else. I first heard of the guy a long, long time ago, back in the early primitive days of the internet, where all the exchanges about gender politics and stuff was happening on discussion threads hosted by Yahoo and really primitive forums. And like Dan said, there was only a handful of guys back then. People like Zed, like Harry, I was there with them, and some others who are unfortunately no longer with us or have moved on. But I didn't talk a lot to Harry back in those days. It wasn't, and this is far predates A Voice for Men. It was after A Voice for Men started where I started getting to know Harry and talking with him regularly. First, it started with a lot of email exchanges, and then Skype came along, and we talked sometimes for hours. And I do know what his real name was, and I know some others do, but I'm not sharing that here out of respect to his family. Harry was guarded about that for professional reasons, which I don't blame him, but I will be able to tell you a few other things about him. Harry had a doctorate in child development, essentially, and he spent 30 years of his life, in addition to being the online pioneer for men's rights, he spent his life dedicated to helping children learn. That's the kind of guy he was. He developed workbooks and tutored children. That was his whole life, was their learning, their education, which I think is a very noble profession. Harry was smart enough to have been a surgeon or anything else in the world he wanted to do, but he chose to dedicate his life to helping children. And he also chose to dedicate a big portion of his life to helping men and boys. It's been said, and it's true, that when you look at Harry's website and you read some of his articles, that he came across as very strident in some ways. And that was so opposite of who Harry was as a human being. A thing that I'll remember fondly always is that in the many discussions that I had with him, it was interesting. Harry didn't ring so much to talk to me about what the next thing ABFM was doing or what he was going to be doing in men's rights. He often called on me to inquire about my health and to offer, because I did go through a period where I was suffering some problems, and that's what Harry focused on. I mean, almost like he did with kids that were learning. He rang me up on Skype and we would talk for hours, and he would tell me about stuff that had to do with his father's health that he had learned some lessons from and shared that with me, and he encouraged me to take care of myself. And in a way, I mean, one of the life changes I've been through, which I'm not going to dwell on here, obviously, is that I've lost a bunch of weight and I'm a lot healthier than I've been in a long time. And Harry had a lot to do with keeping me on track with that. So he wasn't just concerned about all men, he took the time to be concerned with individual men. That being said, Harry was also like the rest of us. I think the rest of us who have chosen, for whatever crazy reason, to dedicate ourselves to such an unpopular worldview. He was a pain in the ass. He could be. Just like I can be I know, a tremendous pain in the ass, and like other people like Zed and like Dan Moore were fiercely independent people who are opinionated, and sometimes there's friction and conflicts but I'm happy and grateful for the fact that whatever friction Harry and I had, it always came back to being friends, to being in contact. And one of the things that saddens me greatly is that I never got to meet him. It was a bucket list item that, and I'm so excited I was, because I'm going to London for the conference this July, and that was one of the big things on my list, was to be able to shake hands with Angry Harry. And now I won't be able to do it, and that really does make me sad. The world lost a great man. I mean, it's fortunate that his legacy is going to continue. It's fortunate that his writings will always be there. We're working hard on a way to preserve all that stuff and to make sure that it remains available to the public for however long we can, because it was Harry's writing. If you know anything about men's rights, this is something that Dan Moore talked about, and he couldn't be more right. If you know anything about men's rights, I mean, there have been great men before, people like Belfort Bax, people like Warren Farrell, that have really dug into the narrative. But where it comes to modern men, men who communicate a lot on the internet, in this culture now, if you know anything about the men's rights movement, you got Angry Harry to thank for it. It was Harry who stood alone, and I mean alone, with a website that at one time had very high traffic and that had Harry concerned about who was following him and who was watching him and finding out, that angered a lot of people. And he had the balls to come up with a name like Angry Harry. And I think about that a lot, that it was, you know, sometimes ABFM gets credit for allowing men a place to vent anger. Well, it was Angry Harry who had the balls to give that anger a name and to put it on himself, recognizing that men were angry. And he left enough of an impact that, like I said, if you know anything about this movement at all, if you know anything about the conflict with social justice warriors, and you know, we've got a lot of rising superstars out there right now, that I won't go too far into it, that I think damn well owe Angry Harry thanks for paving the way to be able to have the kind of discussions they're having, to be able to go on to YouTube and get 1 million hits, and we all owe that to him. And I wanted that to be said. I wanted to put something on the record about that, and I wanted to put it on the record that I think Angry Harry was the greatest MRA of our generation, and probably will be the greatest MRA of all generations to come, because he didn't just make a short-term impact. He started a ball rolling that is still picking up speed. And by God, I'm grateful for it. And I already miss him. Thanks. We'll talk to you next time.